Hi, my name's Lyndon and I've been asked by Holy Stone to do a review of the HS110D drone that they produce. Now, I have looked on YouTube and there are quite a few reviews that have already been done on this particular model, primarily in the States. So I don't really see the point in reinventing the wheel, because most of these reviews seem to follow the same sort of pattern. Here's the box, let's see what's in it, let's fly. So why do that all over again? So what I'm going to do is do this video a little bit differently. I'm not aiming this at you guys who are really proficient drone flyers. You've been probably flying for years, you know all the terminology, etc, etc. I'm aiming this video at the absolute beginner, the newbie, someone who has probably only maybe got a micro drone or a little mini drone and they want to move a little bit up market and get something bigger, better, or the absolute beginner who's got no drone at all, doesn't really know too much about drone flying, not overly familiar with the terminology. That's the person that I'm aiming this video at. So those of you who are proficient drone flyers, if you watch this, a lot of it will be, how can I put it, beneath your experience level. Yeah, I appreciate that. But there may be things in here that you didn't know about or perhaps never thought about, because I will be going into detail like batteries, battery life, the drone sensing battery life, the technicalities of the transmitter, how to fly this using the smartphone, because the smartphone is used to download stills and video. All of that I'll be going into in some detail. So whether or not that's of interest to you, it's up to you. You're more than welcome to watch if you want. But as I say, I'm primarily aiming this at the beginner, the newbie. And I hope that by the end of this video, the beginner will have a little bit more information about flying drones, but hopefully a lot more information about this particular model, which is, in actual fact, a great little drone to fly. So I suppose we'd better start with the obligatory, let's see what's inside the box. Everybody else does. The first thing you notice about Holy Stone packaging is that it is very neat, it's very nicely designed. This is the box. On the front you've got the drone, and on the back you've got details of the transmitter, the batteries, the camera, and the use of the smartphone. So let's open up the box and see what we've got. I'm sure the plant won't mind me leaning that against it. Packaging again is very, very good. We have the drone itself. The camera is already installed and the battery for it again is already installed, as are the undercarriage skids. We then have the transmitter with the card showing the various features of it, which we'll come on to later. We also have the clamp for the smartphone, which goes onto the transmitter. We have 6 propeller protectors, 4 to go onto the drone and 2 spares, nice touch. We also have 2 spare landing skids, and we have this pack of bits and pieces. Let's just open this up and see what we've got. We have a couple of propellers there, some spare screws, 2 more propellers, spares. We have some more different screws that are applicable. We have 2 spare covers for the LEDs, and we have the appropriate screwdriver. And we also have the charging lead. And you always look underneath the packaging to see what there is there. And there we have the instruction book, cautions about using the battery, a quick start guide, and this. Interesting piece of, well, one can hardly call it equipment. Let's just get into it. It appears to be a little notebook. Okay, Holy Stone notebook. Just pop that lid down for a second. Whoops. Inside we have a pen which is just fallen apart, but there you go. I'm sure we can screw it back together again pretty quickly. There we go. Propelling pen or biro. We've got post-it notes. We've got these little coloured sticky bits. Not sure what they're for. And some email addresses, useful email addresses there. And you've got them in Chinese if you happen to speak Chinese, and you've got them in German as well. And a notebook. Well, it's a handy little thing. Not quite sure what one to use it for. I suppose if you are a beginner, then you might want to make notes about the first flights you've done, or where you've been flying, or where you took photographs or video. But I think as you get more experience, this will probably go by the board. But I always carry one of these around with me because I have another drone, and I always carry it in the car because it's well, it's useful for making lists for the shopping. Those are the various bits that are in the box. So I think what we need to do now is look at these one by one. Right, let's look first of all at the transmitter. It takes 4 standard AA batteries. I've got loads of things around the house that take AA, so I always use rechargeables. It makes life so much easier. Okay, let's look at the transmitter in detail. On the top left shoulder there's a button here which controls the camera on board the drone. One single short press will tell the drone to take a single shot. Hold it down for about a couple of seconds, and that will then tell the drone to start filming video. Once you've shot as much video as you want, hold it down again for a couple of seconds and it will stop. The button on this side is the roll button. In other words, you press that and that will then allow you to use this control to tell the drone to roll either side to side or backwards and forwards. And another press on that will stop that function. But these two buttons together actually have another function. Okay, use a bit of imagination here. Let's say we're flying outdoors and all of a sudden something happens. It could be, for example, you lose control, or there's a mechanical or electronic failure and you need to land the drone quickly. Well, you can use the left joystick to bring it down, or you can use the engine start and landing button to bring it down. But if it's going to be an emergency, then what you can do is hit the two buttons at the top, and that acts as a kill switch. And as you've just seen here, it's a fairly hard floor, so it's bounced and landed upside down, but if you're flying in over grass or something like that, then it will land reasonably safely. But if it's an absolute emergency and you need to bring that drone down quickly, then you hit those two buttons at the top. That's your kill switch. It immediately kills the motors and your drone will land. Now we come on to the other controls on the transmitter. We have two joysticks here, left and right. This one, left hand one, controls what I would call the throttles. Up and down, up increases the speed of the drone, down naturally decreases and lands. And left and right will turn the drone horizontally about its vertical axis, left or right. The joystick on the right is what I call the direction joystick. That will fly the drone forwards, backwards, left or right. Now, there are two modes of flying on this transmitter and on this drone. There's mode 1, mode 2. It is automatically shipped in mode 2. Mode 2 means that the throttle is on the left and the direction is on the right. Now if, let's say for example, you happen to be left-handed and you want the throttle on the right, that's very easily done. You can transfer into mode 1, and all you have to do that is to hold that button down there whilst you switch the transmitter on. You keep that held down until the transmitter has fully fired up, then you can release it, and then you'll find that your throttle is there and your direction is there. But it is automatically shipped in mode 2, throttle, direction. This switch on this transmitter is a null switch, which means that it doesn't do anything. This is the switch that you would operate if you want to fly in headless mode, and we'll be coming onto that in due course. These two switches here refer to trim. If you want to trim the drone, if you hover the drone for example and you find that it's moving away from you, then that trim you would start to move downwards. If it's moving towards you, you'd move it upwards. Similarly, if it's moving left or right, then you would put the appropriate trim on there. The one thing that a lot of people forget is that these trim switches do not take immediate effect. It takes a few seconds for the drone to realise it's being trimmed. And a lot of people, beginners, if they see the drone drifting to the, say, the right, they will madly press that switch left, hoping to suddenly cure it. And then, all of a sudden, they'll find the drone is now drifting to the left, so they're putting on loads of right trim. Use these trims very gently. Yes, they do take a little bit of time to take effect, and you may initially have to click it a few times just to get the drone steadied. But with judicial use of those, you will get it steadied. And on the bottom panel here, these two buttons here will increase or decrease the speed of the drone. This button here, they call it the resync. That's the actual button that you press to calibrate the gyro, which you must do every time before you fly the drone. And this button here is the automatic engine start and land button. The display is the status display, and this tells you exactly what status the whole transmitter is in, which is the next bit that we're going to be looking at. Okay, let's have a look at this panel in a bit more detail. If we switch the transmitter on, all the lights come up and the word status flashes. That means that the transmitter is not yet fully activated. To do that, we simply push the left joystick up and then back down, and we're now fully active. The speed buttons can now be used to set the speed of the drone to its slowest or its fastest. This indicator here shows whether or not the roll or the flip option is set. If I press the roll button, that tells us that we can now flip or roll the drone. To switch that off, press again. If we instruct the drone to take a picture or to take video, then when I press the top left button to do that, you'll see that the camera indicator flashes very briefly. The right hand indicator tells us whether we're in normal mode or in headless mode. In this case it's normal. The minute I flick the switch for headless, that goes down and it tells us that we're now in headless mode. So this little panel here tells us exactly what is happening with the transmitter. And I think that's just about all the detail that we need to cover on this. The drone comes next. Okay, now the light level's dropped, we can see what the sequence of these lights is. First of all, we switch on the transmitter, then we switch on the drone, and you can see the white and blue lights come on and then turn to red, and they're turning to red because the transmitter hasn't been paired to the drone yet. So we do that on the left joystick, up, back, down, and the lights change to white and blue, the brightness just going up and down. We then have to calibrate the gyro, and that's done on the bottom right switch here. That's the gyro now calibrated. We now switch on, and once the engines are switched on, or the motors, you'll see that the front LEDs are stationary on white solid, whereas the back LEDs are flashing blue. And it will stay that way until the batteries have reached such a level that the drone now has to land. Now, I'm not going to run this for 8 or 9 minutes or however long. I'll simulate that on the transmitter. If we turn the transmitter off, see the red lights come on and the motors stop. Now, what would happen if the drone was flying and the batteries get low? The red lights immediately come on, the drone will land and the engines will stop. So that's the sequence of how the LEDs light up, and that's the sequence of colours that they show. This is the drone. The camera is featured underneath there, and that will simply unhook if you want to unhook it. I've already put the propeller guards in place here. They're quite stiff to put on, which means if they're stiff to put on, they're probably quite stiff to come off. In fact, I've flown it against the door a couple of times and the garage wall outside, and it's bounced quite well. The battery lives in the back, and I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a little red shrouding there. That's where the two contacts are. This is a 1000 milliamp hour battery rated at 3.7 volts. Now, the actual drone itself comes with this, which is a charging lead, and it means that you can charge the battery in situ if you want to. All you need is some kind of charging mechanism, a hub. I tend to use this, which is an 8-gang USB hub. Simple reason being that the other drone that I have is this one. It's the HS110D. This is what they call the racing drone, and it is quite nippy. And the transmitter for that is this here, which has its own LCD screen. Now, the two have two separate batteries, and in this case they're both LiPos. That's the battery for the drone, and that's the battery for the transmitter. And they have two entirely different contacts. Now, these can't be charged in situ. You've got to take them out, which means that they need two different connectors. These are the connectors that it comes with, and they're two completely different ends to them. That one is for the transmitter, it's quite small, and that one is for the that one's for the drone, that one's for the transmitter. So again, you've got the USB connection, which will go into there. I've got about 5 batteries for those, so after an afternoon's flying I can come back and plug in all of the batteries at the same time and charge them all up at the same time, which is quite handy. As far as this drone is concerned, there is a charging port just underneath there next to the aerial for the camera, because you can charge this battery in situ. So if I just turn this on, reach behind here, you may be able to see the green lights come up. If we put one end of the cable into the charging socket, like so, and the other end into the hub. Again, you might not be able to see it, I'm not sure, but there is a little red light come up there, and that tells us it's charging. Once that red light goes out, then the charging is complete. Now, the point is that if, like me, you've got to travel some distance in order to fly, you wouldn't take this out with just one battery. You would obviously need a few spares. Now, what Holy Stone do is they have this hub that you can order from Amazon, and it comes together with 3 spare batteries. Now, I also obtained a 4th one, so I've got 5 in all. This again is USB. I can use it with this hub here, plug it in, and you can probably see there are 4 green lights there. So we can put these batteries in turn and check the status of them. If the light stays green, then they're fully charged. If it goes red, they're not. So if we put that in, that's green, so that's fully charged. It's making me out to be a lie now because it's just turned red. So there is probably some quite a bit of residual charge in there. We'll put that one in. Oh, that's stayed green, and we put that one in. That's stayed green. Now that one's just topped itself up, so it must have been pretty full. That one's still a little way to go. Those three are okay, so we can take those out. And we'll try the one that's in the drone. And that's fully charged as well. So this one isn't, so we can leave that one to charge, and we can work with these four. Now, one of the things I got to thinking was, what are the voltages shown on these? It's 3.7 nominal, but when you fully charge it, as anybody knows who's dealt with rechargeable batteries, you always get a higher voltage reading. So I charge this up. Now, that little red shroud there, it's far too small. The little holes there for the contacts are far too small to get your probes from your multimeter down. But on both sides, there is a gap in the shrouding. There's one on that side and there's one on that side. So you can get the probes from your multimeter onto those and find out what the reading is. So I did that. Fully charged, it was giving me 4.2 volts, which is what you'd expect. It's always over the nominal. So then I put it into the drone and I flew it in here, just hovering around until the red lights came up and the drone landed. I then checked the voltage again and actually found it was up at 3.43 volts, which struck me as being quite high. So then that led me to the next question: what is it within the drone that the drone is sensing that tells it when to stop flying? Is it checking voltage that's coming from the battery? Is it checking current? What's it doing? It can't be on a timer, because if you just have the drone hovering, say, in here as I had, and then you take it outdoors, you fly it all around the place, you fly it up, down, you get the camera working, you do flips, rolls, etc., etc., you really make it work hard, it's going to run the battery down quicker. So I reckon, logically, a timer is out. So how does it do it? And again, I thought, well, it's got to be either measuring voltage or measuring current. So I sent an email to my contact at Holy Stone, and she came back to me with the answer, and I quote, "The drone does not sense voltage or current from the battery." But that's all I got. So again, I started thinking about this, and to me, it's got to be measuring the power from this somehow. If it's not measuring it directly, then maybe it's measuring it indirectly. Whichever is the case, it must be something to do with the battery, or at least that's what logic says. But if any of you guys out there knows how the drones do it, and you know how they know when to stop flying, then put a comment below on this video and let's know. I'd be fascinated to know what the reason is. Now, there's one other thing that we haven't talked about yet as far as this drone is concerned, and that is, well, there are two things actually. The drone itself, it has got an altitude hold facility, which we'll try next, and then it's designed to be used with a smartphone, which we'll cover in the next section. So what I'll do is I'll just move the video camera, we'll just put those to one side, and I'll pop this on the floor and we'll see what the altitude hold facility is like. Okay, now I've put it on the floor, I've switched on, we switch the transmitter on, we couple the transmitter to the drone, we then sync the gyro, start the motors, and let's see what happens. Now I'll just get this centralised as much as I can by using the trims. You don't want it flying outside the door. Now, I don't have my hand on the left joystick, and as you can see, it is floating up and down. So let's bring it down a bit. Okay, up it goes, and it is floating around. So let's land it. There is a very good reason for that. Now, these drones have inside them what is called a barometric sensor, and what this does is it senses barometric pressure or air pressure. It's quite a sensitive little piece of electronics, but there is one disadvantage to it. Now, if you look at the changes in air pressure in a conservatory like this, from ground to ceiling, which is maybe about 10 feet high, the air pressure up there is going to be exactly the same as it is here. And that's why the drone floats up and down, because it has no real datum point. If you took it outside and took it up 50 feet, say, it would probably hold better there. Take it up to 100 feet, probably hold reasonably well there. But to get accurate altitude hold, there's one other sensor that should be in here, and that's the ultrasonic sensor. And what that does is it will measure the distance from the drone to any of the obstacles around it, including the ground. Now, if you look at, say, the DJI Mavic Pro 2 or the Pro Zoom, that has sensors in, so it can sense 360 degrees on 6 axes. So it knows what's above it, below it, left and right, front and back. And you need that for accuracy, because ultrasonic sensors are very accurate. I was down walking the dog about 3 or 4 weeks ago down at the beach, and we have like an esplanade that runs by the beach, and there's a guy there who had a drone. So I thought, fine, we'll have a chat to him about this. Now, these drones here, this sort of drone in this sort of price range, you're looking at about sort of that square and that off the table or the ground. This drone he was flying was about that square and about that far off the ground, because it had slung underneath a camera. On a gimbal, he could turn it through 360 degrees, he could turn it up and down. The controller he was using looked like the flight deck of a space shuttle. This thing would do anything at all. So he started it up and he flew it down the esplanade about a quarter of a mile down the coastline, took it right out to sea, brought it back again and stopped it in front of us. And it was about 30 feet above the beach. And the vertical movement on this drone, it was like that. It hardly moved at all. Yes, there was a breeze, and yes, it was moving side to side, it was moving forwards and backwards. But vertically, hardly at all. And when he landed it, I said, you haven't just got a barometric sensor in that, have you? He said, no, it's got the ultrasonic sensor, and that is how you get the accuracy. Now, none of the drones, to the best of my knowledge, in this sort of price range, have got that extra ultrasonic sensor in. You've got to go somewhat upmarket to get that. And he had his laptop with him, and he showed me the kind of pictures he was getting with this. He showed me some video, he showed me some stills. The camera he had in that was a 1920 by 1080p with about a 20 megapixel resolution. Those pictures are so sharp you could have cut yourself on them. It's absolutely brilliant. So I just said to him, are you a drone pilot? Do you do it for a living, professionally? Do you make documentaries or films? He said, no, I just do it as a hobby. So I said, well, could you use this drone for documentaries or film work? He said, well, yeah, documentaries you could, film work, no. You'd have to go a bit further up the food chain for that. He said, this is an entry level from this particular manufacturer. I can't remember what make it was. And he said, you wouldn't really use this basic model for really high quality work. So I said, if you don't mind me asking, how much is an entry model like this? He said, oh, that was £5,000. So don't expect £5,000 drone quality in a drone costing about £100, because you're not going to get it. It has its limitations, live with them. Once you accept those limitations, then you'll be quite happy. So the next thing that we need to do
is to take it outside on a nice calm day. It's nice and sunny today, but the problem is, as I mentioned to you, we live near the coast, so we get a lot of fairly strong onshore winds, and it's quite windy today, so I wouldn't even attempt to fly it outside today. But I'll wait until we get a nice calm day and I'll take it down to the park. Now, I'm not going to fly it around like a maniac, taking it up as high as I can or running it as fast as I can, because there are already videos on YouTube that show how it flies. So I would watch those if that's what you want to see. What I'm going to do is just take it down there, and for those beginners who don't know how the headless mode works, I'll show that. I'll take a few stills, I'll take some video, pop that into this video, and you'll see what the performance of the camera is. And then we'll see what conclusions we come to. Now, there is one final thing to look at before we actually go out there flying. I did mention it earlier, and that is to see how we use a smartphone in connection with the drone, either to fly the drone on its own or use it with the transmitter for the FPV, the first person view. So what we need to do is to get ourselves a smartphone. Now, if you have a QR reader, quick response reader on your smartphone, then you can read these optical matrix bar charts, and you can use one for iOS, which is the iPhone, or one for Google, which is Android. And you click on that particular app on your iPhone, read that, and it will take you immediately to the App Store, where you can download the appropriate app onto your smartphone, and the app is called HS110D. And here you can see it. It's a square with like a lens on it, and you can see the name underneath, HS2FPV. And now if we click on that, we can see the various screens that this comes up with. Now, if you look at the main screen, you'll see that there are 5 selections that you can make. The first one is gallery. If you press that, it will bring up on the screen any still pictures or videos that you've already shot. If you press on support, that will bring you up the various email addresses for Holy Stone in Canada, America, Europe and Japan, just in case you want to contact them. If you click on learn, then this will bring up a little short video that will show in the top there, which shows you how to put the battery in and how to fly the drone. Probably one of the more interesting ones, apart from the enter device, which we'll come to in a minute, is this one here, which is the help screen. So if we press on that and we turn that around, let's just adjust the camera so we can see that a bit more clearly. Unfortunately, we're getting certain reflections off the screen, but I'm hoping you can see that okay. This is your virtual transmitter. So you've got the joysticks there, which you can move in any direction. You've got the trims there, which you can slide your fingers on to adjust the trims on the drone. This you would use, obviously, if you're using the smartphone to control the drone. You wouldn't use this if it's connected straight to the transmitter, if it's on the transmitter. You've got all the little labels there that tell you exactly what does what, and if you are using the phone to control the drone, then you've got all these little icons along the top here, which you would tap depending upon what it is you want. You've got the on-off switch, you've got the little camera there for still pictures, you've got the video camera for video pictures, you've got gallery there, you've got Wi-Fi connection, etc, etc. So that you would use purely on its own with the drone. Now, I personally don't like using these for one very simple reason. Let me just zoom the camera back a bit. And that reason is that I tend to have quite dry fingers, so I can often lose connection. If you're tapping out a message, it doesn't matter because you can tap on a letter any number of times that you want. But if you're controlling a drone that's up in the air and you lose contact with this, then that can spell bad news. Plus the other fact, of course, that I've never been used to this sort of technology. Now, I have an 11-year-old grandson who got a little mini drone for Christmas, and it's controlled by his smartphone. So he downloaded the appropriate software, and literally within 20 minutes he was flying all around the house. He was doing flips, rolls, flying up and down, backwards, forwards, out in the garden, because this sort of technology is something that he has been brought up to all his life. He's been playing video games with joysticks, PS whatever they are, or Xboxes, and now since he got a smartphone he plays games there. So he is totally used to this sort of technology. Now creakies like me aren't, because I've never played video games, I must be honest. Well, no, that's strictly not true. I used to play Space Invaders, but that was about 50 years ago. Since then, no, I have not played video games on a TV, and I've not played games on a smartphone. Now, I know what you're thinking. Goodness me, never played that. We've actually now found Stone Age Man. Well, no you haven't, cheeky. It's just that I've never had the desire to play the games. There you go. So, for those people like me who are not used to this, it's not something that comes intuitively, but it's something that you have to learn. And it's not all that difficult. So I would simply use this in its FPV mode, and in that case it simply clips onto there, onto the transmitter. I can now operate the joysticks, operate the buttons, operate the sliders. I can see what the status is. This is what I personally like. I can take still pictures, I can take video, and everything is recorded on there, plus the fact that what I see on that screen is exactly what the drone sees. For me, that's a perfect system. Okay, what is headless mode? Well, there is some controversy about it, but we'll come to that later. Let's just see what it is first for the beginners who are not quite sure. When you're flying in ordinary normal mode, and I'm not talking about altitude here, I'm only talking in two dimensions, okay, backwards, forwards, left and right. We'll say, for argument's sake, that the front of the drone is where the camera is, and the back is where the battery is. Okay, so you take off and you're flying and you push the right stick forwards, it moves forwards. You pull it back, it moves back. You push it left, it moves left. You push it right, it moves right, which is fine. However, if you turn it through 90 degrees so that now that it's pointing to the right, if I push it forward now, it flies that way. Back, it flies that way. Right, it flies that way, because it's flying according to the inputs that are being put according to the drone's orientation, and it will do that all the time. Now, when you switch to headless mode, what you would do is you would normally put this on the ground, you would switch on the transmitter, you'd pair the transmitter to the drone, you'd flick on headless mode, set the gyro, and off you go. Now this time, if you push the stick forward, it'll move forward, back, it'll move back, left, it moves left, and right, it moves right. Fine, same as normal mode. But if you now turn the drone through 90 degrees and push the stick forward, instead of going that way, which is in normal mode, it still goes forwards according to where the pilot is. Backwards, it flies back to the pilot, left, it flies to the pilot's left, and right, it flies to the pilot's right. So it doesn't matter what the orientation of that drone is. In headless mode, it will obey those four simple commands: backwards, forwards, left and right, according to the inputs that you put on here. Now, there are a lot of people who don't like this, and if you go onto the various websites, there are some controversial opinions. Some people say that beginners shouldn't be taught headless mode flying. They should be taught the normal controls on the transmitter in normal mode. That way they get used to flying. I wouldn't disagree with that. But there's the other side of the coin that says headless flying is an easier way to fly the drone,
and it gets the beginner used to using the controls in a simplified way. I have seen some comments on the net, and I wouldn't disagree with that point of view either, but I have seen some comments on the net that says flying in headless mode is cheating. Cheating what? Cheating whom? I don't see that it's cheating. I simply see headless mode as another way of flying the drone. And why not? You can fly it in normal, you can fly it in headless. There is one snag though when you're flying in headless mode, and that is that the pilot should stay exactly where he is. He puts the drone in front of him pointing forwards and sets up the transmitter and the gyros and takes off. Now that's fine as long as the drone is in front of him and he can see it. But what happens if he's bringing it back to him and a gust of wind or something catches it and it goes over his head, behind him? The natural thing to do is to turn around to see where it is. And the minute you do that, that special connection between the transmitter and the drone in headless mode is broken, because you've moved the transmitter, you've disorientated it, in other words. So when you then try to use the right control, as you were doing, your drone can literally fly all over the place. So the easiest way then to control it is to flick out of headless mode and use the controls as per normal. So it is advisable to be fully au fait with those controls before you fly in headless mode. But again, there's nothing to stop the beginner doing both. Have one session of flying in headless and the other using normal controls. Headless mode can be useful for the beginner if he's doing video or doing pictures, because he can take it up there as long as it's in front of him. He can turn the drone round on its axis, vertical axis, in any direction, take video, take stills, and he can still use those same 4 controls. If he wants to bring the drone back to him, pull the stick back and back it comes. If the wind takes it over to the left, he simply puts right stick on to line it back up again. So there are arguments to and fro, for and against. I'm not going to get involved in those arguments. I think that headless mode has its place and has its uses, but it's up to the individual. If you want to fly in headless, fine. If you don't, that's up to you. But that, in a nutshell, is headless mode. Now the last bit of this video that we're doing before we get on to the conclusions is actually showing you what the camera can do. Now it's quite windy today. I've been down to the park to see what the wind was like, and it's quite open there and it is quite windy, so I wouldn't attempt to fly that. But our back garden here is quite sheltered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the drone out into the back garden, shoot some video with it and throw in some stills there as well, so you can see what the camera can do. As I said earlier, I'm not flying it 100 feet high, 100 yards away. That's not what this is about. If you want to see that, there are other videos on the internet that show that. What this is designed to show you is what the camera can do. Now our back garden is relatively colourful, we've got lots of flowers in there, so keeping that in mind, you can see how the drone really translates those flowers to recordings. So that's what we'll do next, and then we'll get on to the final bit, which is the conclusions. Okay, conclusions. I've been making a few notes as I've been going along, just as memory joggers. I think it's worth saying something about Holy Stone to begin with. I've done quite a bit of research on the net about them, looked at the various drones that they sell, not so much for the drone specs but for the people's comments who have bought these, and just to see what people are saying. And it's interesting that of all the information that I managed to cull, nearly 80% of reviewers gave 5 stars for the drones, and around 90% of the reviewers who expressed an opinion rated HS's customer service as excellent. I can only speak for myself. I have also found it excellent. In fact, I wish the customer service of every company I dealt with was as good as HS. I'm not saying that just because they're paying me tens of thousands of pounds to say it. They're not. I wish they were. I'd be a very rich man. But I have found their service to be absolutely excellent. I had a few problems with the other drone that I've got, the HS110D, and in no time at all they had those problems solved. So they seem to have gone out right from the very beginning to give excellent customer service, and they seem to have achieved it pretty well. Okay, as far as the drone is concerned, pros and cons. I must admit I was fairly hard pushed to find any cons, and the ones that I did find you could consider to be nitpicking mainly. First of all, it seems to have fairly limited FPV distance, first person viewing distance. They quote about 100 meters in the book, but again, checking other drones, 100 meters seems to be about par for the course, and there again, for a drone like this, would you want to fly it further than 100 meters or so away from where you are? So I think that's reasonable. It also has a limited transmitter distance. In this instance it's about 120 meters, but again, do you want to fly it any further away than that? Average battery life, they quote 10 minutes in the book. I found it to be just under 9, as I explained earlier. And again, checking other drones, this seems to be par for the course. However, contrary to some information I've read on the net, which is in error, there is no GPS facility on this, and there is no return to pilot facility on this. To get those two features, then you've really got to go further upmarket, naturally pay more money. The camera quality, yes, is average, but again it's no worse than other drones in this particular price range. I have read comments from people saying that the photographic quality is terrible. Well, I don't think it's terrible, but it's horses for courses. You know, you pay your money, you take your choice. It is what it is, and I think one has to accept that. If you want, as I mentioned earlier, £5,000 drone quality on your pictures and quality of build and everything else, then get your checkbooks out and pay £5,000 for a drone. Okay, which comes to the pros really, and I've jotted the ones that I've jotted down here. Easy to use, which it is. It's very easy to fly, beginners and experienced pilots as well. It's a simple operation. Probably the most complicated bit is getting your phone connected, but that's not really complicated either. It has good stability when it's flying, apart from of course the altitude hold, which does vary, as you've seen. It's a nice appearance, it's very nicely designed, nice smooth lines, stylish. It's got the built-in camera again, which isn't brilliant, but as I said, it is what it is. Batteries are very easily changed on this, and it's quite a reasonable price. In the UK here it sells for $99.99 sterling. In America it's $129.99 US dollars. In Canada it's $139.99 Canadian dollars. So it's not an expensive drone. It's easy to fly, it's good to fly, it's good fun, and on the transmitter you've got everything there that you need. So would I recommend it? Yeah, I'd recommend this to anybody. I think it's a great little drone for the money, and particularly for the beginners, which is what, as I said earlier, this video is aimed at. It's aimed at primarily beginners. I think you'll find this a very, very nice drone to fly. So if you do buy one of these, and I would thoroughly recommend them, happy flying. Let's see what Holy Stone come up with next. Okay, have a good day.